Why, hello, my friend. How are you? Well, it is Sunday, the day I'm recording, and I went back to the synagogue today. So you could say this is my second or my third impression, depending on how you want to define it. Um, and this week I didn't go to the, gosh, I don't even know what they call it, the service. I'm just going to call it service. Um, but I did go to a men's group today. Services yesterday. They do it on Saturday. Um, so I went to a men's group today, and the conversation was interesting. I thought it was profound, and there were a lot of intellectual subjects covered, and it was a good group of guys. But what I want to cover today is actually unrelated to my experience at the synagogue. I guess mainly because there hasn't really been a development. Um, there hasn't really been a development, in the sense that the questions that I have that I'm looking for answers to about the nature of God and those sorts of questions were not really addressed or brought up, um, and so I will just continue on the path. And that's not a critique. I'm not expecting any of these things to happen overnight. Just so we're clear. So instead, I want to discuss an artifact which is in my possession, which I cherish and have cherished from the day that I encountered it. It's very special to me. It's an amazing little book. The background on this before I pull it up and show you what it is I went to. Well, let me back up. I was thinking about how am I going to furnish my home. And, many of you have pointed out, although because I've changed the camera angle, you can't see most of it, but I have a lot of really interesting things in my home. And many people have pointed that fact out. Um, and I have a very eclectic mix of things and a sort of a vintage or even antique in many cases style. And there's a lot of beauty in my house as a result of that. And that's primarily because I go to estate sales very often. Very, very often. Multiple times every single month, I go to estate sales, and certainly at least once a month. I never go a month without going to estate sales. It's a hobby of mine. It's a passion. You could say it's just one of the ways which I enjoy spending my time. But um, by recommendation of my loving mother, she said, "Well, if you need to furnish your place, you know how we used to do it back in the days, we would go to estate sales when we were furnishing our place." And I realized that's a really good idea. I should do that. I don't know why I haven't thought of that. This is me. Um, Really, a little more than a full year ago, I've been going to estate sales for a year and some amount of months now, and so I went. Maybe almost a year and a half at this point. Gosh, I went, and on my very first estate sale I went to, it was a beautiful home with lots of very eclectic items. It was a chaotic mix of items. They had themed rooms. There's an entire room that was themed like in Swarovski crystals. The entire room was covered in Swarovski crystals. They had an entire room themed with African, I'm not sure what the word would be, imagery and dolls and all these kinds of collectible things, and many of many or possibly all of them were authentic. That's the interesting thing about this home. It was clearly a person who had done fairly well for themselves. Um, and there were many, many rooms like this. All of them were themed, and it was a fairly large house in an affluent neighborhood. And I went through the entire house. I didn't find anything I wanted. I was really there to buy furniture. So I mean, I wasn't really furniture shopping. There were several pieces I was curious about, but many or most of them were priced out of the range that I was willing to spend. And so I was getting ready to leave. I looked to my right. There's a little kitchen and a little corridor down the other way. And I thought to myself, it's a kitchen. And I don't need, utensils and cutlery. And they said at the end of the corridor was basically a closet in the garage. The garage was off limits for this estate sale. So I said, you know what? There's nothing over there. I'm just going to leave. Sorry, I got to get the cigar going again. It wanted to quit on me. So I was going to leave, and when I got to the frame of the doorway to exit, I froze. It was almost like a voice in my head was like, "Go back in. Like, you can't leave yet. You have not done your due diligence. You didn't explore the entire property." It was like a feeling or a sentiment, and I was like, "Well, I'm already here. I drove all the way down here." So I went back in and I went into the kitchen. Sitting on the counter of the kitchen, very innocuous. I mean, it was almost like, you know, it didn't even have a price sticker on it. Was this book. I don't know if you can see that. It's going to blur as I get closer, but this is a Siddur, or a book of daily prayers. They open back to front, as many old, especially Middle Eastern texts do. And the cover is some kind of old plastic material, I think. ChatGPT and I have been working on what this might be. Um, I thought it was celluloid, and so did the people who sold it to me, but there's reasons why that might not be, or there are reasons why it might actually be impossible that it is that. So anyway, at any rate, I found this book. Inside the cover, it said $100. I thought, wow, that's expensive. What is it? And I opened the cover, and I saw inside. I don't know if you can read this. Maybe not. I'll read it to you. The form of daily prayers, according to the custom of the German and Polish Jews, with a new translation by Joseph Guns, published in Vienna, 1857, published by the Jos Schlesinger company. So this little text was published in 1857. And because of the age and what it is, as it turns out, this is actually quite a remarkable little book. And I feel very privileged to have it in my collection. A few details on this book and why it's potentially quite special. I mean, it is special regardless, but there are additional variables which might make it very, very special. So obviously, in 1857, we predate World War I and we predate World War II. There would have been, even back then, some signals that some bad things were coming. Johann Gottlieb Fichte was alive in the late 1700s, and he was publishing very radically anti-Semitic work, blaming the Jews for a lot of the problems that Germany was having. In fact, I think that he is really the original author of what happened in the 1940s. If you read his work carefully, you can see the text explicitly laid out. The game plan was already there, well over 100 years before it was actioned in the grotesque and disgusting and horrible way that it eventually would be. And This means that whoever owned this book, whoever was publishing this book, the kinds of people who were reading these things were side by side with that kind of rhetoric. And my belief is that some of the people living there would have seen the writing on the wall, so to speak, or at least anticipated that something bad was possible. And it would not surprise me in the least if the reason this particular book is with me is because its owners fled what they believed to be an inevitable coming calamity. That's one variable. Needless to say, what would happen to the people who lived in that region is a immeasurable tragedy. One of the most horrible things that's ever happened in history, and disturbingly recent by all accounts. You'd see things like that happening in ancient history, long time before this, but it was quite a recent thing. So it's special because of who the book is for and where it was published in Vienna regionally. Um, Anything in the region that looked like this would have been burned in the 40s, less than 100 years later, but almost 100 years later. So we don't have very many of these old books from the, 1850s and things like that. Um, Another reason it's special is because I think that my ancestry is from that region, the German Polish region. I know that we're from Prussia, and I can't tell you why, but I have this suspicion that even on my father's side, there's some Jewish ancestry. Just a hunch. Um, we definitely have it on my mom's side. No one in my family has ever been a practicing Jew. We've always been Christian, but um, as it turns out, on my mom's side, we have the bloodline. I haven't personally validated it, but I've heard it on good good sources that we do. Now, the other reason this book is quite remarkable is that it was published in 1857. The cover appears to be celluloid. I'm going to try to get some shine on it. Um, it does not appear to be bone or ivory. It's very smooth. There are little indents where it looks like the mold was poured and things like that. It looks like an early plastic. Even if it was celluloid, this would be like pre-industrial celluloid. Like this is before celluloid popularized and became used for this kind of thing. This would have been basically before people knew that celluloid existed, basically, if this really is celluloid. That's one. But two, because it's before the date that celluloid was invented, which is 1860, it's much more likely something else, and it's probably Parkazine. This is what ChatGPT thinks. Who knows? I have not got it appraised. I have not got it tested. And if it's Parkazine, it's basically the only known book using Parkazine. Certainly the only Siddur I've ever heard of. And there's no references or sources I could find of anything comparable that uses Parkazine. Parkazine, I don't know how to pronounce it. Um, in fact, there was a Parkazine comb that was sold for $3,000, and this is significantly more special than that. for obvious reasons. So I have no idea what it's worth, but it's worth a lot to me. It's a very, very special document to me for many reasons. One, it's the first thing I ever bought in a estate sale. Two, I have familial ties to that region. Um, three, through my mother's side, we have some Ashkenazi Jewish lineage, and this would be the Ashkenazi Jewish daily prayer book. And four, um, it's potentially made of the first plastic that ever existed. All of these variables come together. And five, the implications of the region and the history that's relevant to it. All of these variables come together to form what is, in my opinion, the most precious thing in my possession. And spectacular, um, I have some spectacular things that I own. And this is my favorite of all of them. I absolutely love this little book. Um, it almost does feel like I was called to find this book, if I'm being totally transparent. Like I was led to it. Um, and I'm very grateful to have it. The significance of it is not lost on me by any means. And these are the kinds of things that you can't plan for. You can't sit down one day and say I'm going to come into contact with a quasi ancient artifact, certainly a super antique artifact of extraordinary rarity, and have the means by which to acquire it. All you can do is set yourself up so that if that context arises, you're ready for it. And luckily, I have done that in my life. And I go out into the world and I make things happen, and amazing things come my way, and oftentimes I'm able to expose myself to things which sometimes I deserve and sometimes I don't, but I'm always grateful for them. At any rate, that is really what I wanted to show you today, was this unbelievable piece of history. Beautiful, historic. I spent some time reading it. It's quite an incredible thing, and I wanted to share that with you today. And yeah, I'm going to continue attending the synagogue, and I'm optimistic that like I said last time, I'm optimistic that hopefully this will be a place where I continue to go for quite some time in my search for meaning. But with that being said, this video will probably upload it at 7 a.m. So I wish you a fruitful day, and hope you have a wonderful, prosperous work week. And peace and blessings to you all. And I'll hope to see you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. This is Dan versus Everything. Bye bye.